Welcome to Ryan Chats With, a podcast where we get to speak with leaders and game changers all around our community and all around our nation. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, which means it's time for a special edition of the Ryan Chats With podcast, the Mental Health Check-In, with our friends over at Brook. Well, hey, what's going on, guys? It's Ryan Smetzer. Welcome to a special edition of Ryan Chats With. I'm so excited to dive into this month of content. It's Mental Health Awareness Month, and so we are providing the Mental Health Check-In with our friends at Brook. We want to break down the stigma that we can't have conversations about these subjects, and especially over the past year, it's so important for us to be able to dive in and have these conversations. So today, we are tackling depression, whether it's situational depression or major depression. We're covering all angles of it. And we are so excited to have on with us Miss Robin Morris from Brook. Robin, great to have you here today.
It is great to be here, Ryan. Thank you.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your role at Brook.
I am a psychotherapist and certified counseling trauma professional, which means I work with any and everyone that feels they need to talk to someone. I also provide intake services for Brook outpatient services.
Gotcha. And, it is Mental Health Awareness Month, and our intention this month is to be able to dive into some of those, topics that some people may find uncomfortable or may find to be, a little too intense for them. And so, our intention during these next couple of weeks is to tackle those topics, because a lot of times we're having that realization, especially over the last year, that we're affected by this. We're affected by depression,
absolutely,
anxiety, and and they're starting to kind of come to light over the last several months. And so today we're talking about depression, and there are two larger types of depression: situational depression and major depression that we're tackling today. But situational depression is something that a lot of people have kind of discovered that they have encountered over the last year. Tell us a little bit about situational depression and what the difference is between that and the kind of clinical depression that folks deal with and treat on a daily basis.
Sure. Situational depression can be looked at as sort of like an emotional adjustment to a situation. In other words, you break up with your significant other. That creates an emotional adjustment. Loss of a job, loss of a loved one to death, being diagnosed with a serious illness, things like that kind of like cause your emotional makeup to do a shift like, oh my God, this is a horrible thing. With that, then comes a low mood, feeling like you have nowhere to turn, and just an overall sense of sadness. That would be the basic description, if you will, of situational depression.
Mm-hmm. Now, have there been times where if somebody is dealing with situational depression that they may not immediately catch it coming on? Like they might be, in a spot where they're kind of almost in denial of situational depression?
That's the actual difference. One of the actual differences between major depressive disorder and situational depression. When you and that loved one break up, you immediately feel sad. When someone dies, you immediately feel sad. When something happens to you that shifts you emotionally, that's more immediate. You get that punch in the chest. You know what I mean? You want to put your head under a pillow. You know what I mean? It's, oh my God, what am I going to do? Usually it's within a couple of days of the actual incident, whatever that incident is. You feel bad. You feel bad, and you feel bad for a couple of days. So I'm gonna stumble over my words, but yeah, it's more immediate than major depression, that oncoming clinical type of thing.
Gotcha. And say somebody is dealing with the loss of a loved one or a breakup or something that is that immediate reaction, that immediate feeling of sadness, of that situational depression. What's their step that they should take kind of immediately in that situation? Like when they're dealing with situational depression, what are the steps to kind of take as they're starting to deal with it themselves?
Well, and what they really need to do is confront and then identify what's going on with them. You if you wake up and you're crying when you get up in the morning, if you're crying before you go to sleep at night, if you're tossing and turning, if you suddenly become your appetite is decreasing or increasing significantly, you feel like you just have no energy whatsoever. The first thing the person should think of or should consider is what's actually going on in my life right now. The moment, if they can put their finger on what's going on right now, that usually says, oh, okay. And it kind of validates the feeling. You can usually validate the fact that you feel badly. And once that happens, it really should help you feel a little better. Once you can say, oh, yeah, I just broke up with him 2 days ago. I feel horrible. But yeah, that makes sense. You know what I mean? If you're on to your second week, you might want to come in and speak to a mental health professional who will then help you validate those feelings. Once you are really able to accept that you are feeling the way you feel because of what happened, you kind of like calm it down and go, okay, I can ride this out.
Mhm. Absolutely. And you kind of read my mind on the next question too. When you reach that step to go to a mental health professional to, have those conversations about your situational depression, what are the steps in treatment? Whether it's, therapy, sitting down and having those conversations with a professional, how does that work out?
Well, usually, for us here at Brooklyn, um, an individual coming in would schedule an intake or an assessment.
Mhm.
And then at the assessment is where the individual would actually find out if they are struggling with something more, clinically serious, or is it you're having an emotional adjustment to a specific thing. For instance, if I lose a loved one, I'm struggling. I feel bad. I have no energy. Blah blah blah. And I think that I might need to talk to someone, schedule an appointment, have the intake. During the intake, one of the questions would be, have you experienced a loss recently? If you say in or why are you here, first and foremost, okay? Once you say, well, my mom died 2 weeks ago, well, there's the therapist is then cued. You know what I mean? Oh, okay. How long have you been feeling this way? I've been feeling this way for a couple of days. Or my boyfriend and I broke up 6 months ago. How long have you been feeling this way? I've been feeling this way for a couple of months. Well, are you working? Yes, I go to work every day. I still do this. I still attend to my daily needs, things like that. The therapist is then able to assess that, oh, this is more of a situational type thing.
Yeah. Do you find that if somebody is kind of loaded with a heavier schedule, or maybe they're kind of, providing almost their own distractions to their situational depression, do you find that the situational depression kind of almost becomes a long term issue, even though at times it could be, taken care of in a short term basis?
Well, it just depends on what the situation is. You know what I mean? Absolutely. You will hear individuals tell, or even clinicians tell someone, keep busy. You know what I mean? Keep busy, because if you keep busy, you're actually working through, your emotions are working through your busyness, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
If it's not situational, the working through is not going to help.
Hmm. Gotcha.
Another difference.
Yeah, yeah, which leads us into major depression, and
Right.
there seems to be kind of significant differences between the two. What are the signs of major depression? Kind of those initial signs. Obviously, with situational depression, there is that situation that is
That is
triggering
the
the
thing.
response.
Right.
But with major depression, it's a little bit of a deeper level. What are the kind of steps and what are the initial signs of major depression?
Initial signs are, just low mood and irritability that last over a significant period of time. I'm talking about 2 to 3 weeks of low mood, irritability, not wanting to be bothered with too much of anything or anybody. And this is every day for nearly every day, nearly all day long, which then would prevent somebody from like going to work or going to school or allowing themselves to be distracted, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. And then, as the person is kind of working through those steps or those initial signs of major depression, what is the first step as far as, kind of reaching out for treatment, for therapy for that?
Usually it's the same thing. A lot of times with clinical depression, it's the person's loved ones that will notice it because of the length of time that they've been down under. And that conversation, what's wrong with you? Unfortunately, for clinical depression, most clinically depressed people are accused of being lazy and unmotivated before it's recognized that they're actually depressed. Why don't you want to get up? Why are you laying around? Why haven't you taken a shower? Those kinds of things. And they're viewed as being negative by their loved ones, by maybe their friends. And it's the loved one that will, maybe you need to go talk to somebody.
Hmm. Yeah, I was gonna say because that almost kind of seems like it weighs down even further when it turns into the
Oh
why
my
don't you
goodness.
blank, why aren't you
Oh,
blank, all of those
right,
things.
right.
Now, if a loved one is noticing that, say, their loved one is, in a spot where they're thinking, okay, it might be clinical depression, what are the better ways then to kind of approach it? Then, hey, why are you just laying around? Why aren't you doing X, Y, and Z?
Well, the conversation has to come from an empathetic heart.
Hmm.
You know, the conversation has to come from, you're beginning to worry me. I'm feeling like you might be depressed. And if you are, that's something that needs to be addressed. And because I care about you and don't want you to be in this dark space, maybe, we, or maybe you should think about at least getting an assessment, as opposed to, like you said, what's wrong with you? Why don't you get up? Why don't you
Yeah.
take a shower? That type of thing.
Mhm. Gotcha. And then obviously with situational depression, you had kind of touched on typically that process is, sitting down, having those conversations, with a therapist, with a specialist. But with major depression, what are the usual treatment processes? Whether it's a therapy situation or medicine, what are the typical processes of treating major depression?
The most one of the most significant um, um, symptoms that the therapist, the clinician, is looking at is the person's willingness to, or the if there's any suicidality, if there's any homicidality, if there's any self harm, okay? In those situations, they require immediate psychiatric evaluations. In other words, to have medication consults, okay? Because there needs to be an energy uplift, and that is what the medication is for, to uplift the mental energy so that they can actually do the work to process through. If a person is in fact clinically depressed, All right. And there is or has been no suicide ideation, no self harm, no homicide ideation of any kind, then, the typical is an hour and a half therapy session, weekly or bi-weekly, to kind of confront and identify what triggers that mood.
Gotcha. And I know that kind of going back to situational depression, I've
Mhm.
seen a lot of conversation about how that can be sometimes treated at home, whether it be through online means of videos, self care,
Absolutely.
some of those different elements. List some of those options as far as like if somebody is in a spot, especially with COVID, with loss, with job loss, with relationship loss, all of those different things.
Mhm.
Some ways that they might be able to, at least make that attempt to treat it home before maybe they go and reach out for therapy.
Well, one of the things is increasing it, and just work with me here, increasing their happiness in their situation. Okay, many, it's you're isolated at home. You've been home. You're not working. Talking about with the COVID thing. Well, increase activity in something and that you like. You know what I mean? If it's cooking, cook a little more. If it's crafting, craft a little more. Work on you doing the things that make you feel good, to the best that you can, isolated at home. Exercise, you know what I mean? Eating healthy snacks rather than chips and popcorn, all day long. Just doing jumping jacks in your bedroom, getting yourself motivated just for the. I'm going to stress and reiterate, when it's situational, the individual usually knows what it is that pushed them down. So in dealing with that reality, okay, that it's not the end of the world. It does feel like it. It's not the end of the world. And I'm responsible for bringing myself up out of this hole. If it's if it doesn't, if you are unable to bring yourself up, then you have to reach out. Simple as that. You have to reach out.
Mhm. Gotcha. And then from that point forward, they can do consultations and have those conversations.
Consultations online. They can do, depending on their spirituality, they can join, sit in on a church service online. You know what I mean? They can consult with a spiritual advisor online. They can consult with a therapist online if they don't want to step out.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, Robin, thank you so much. I mean, these conversations, again, they're dropping that stigma that we can't have talks like this, that we can't have these kinds of conversations, and it's more important than ever. And you're making us better as a community, and we thank you for that, Robin.
I hope so. And just remind your listeners that reach out to your friends and family every once in a while. Tell a joke, make them laugh, make them smile, let them know everything's going to be okay.
That's awesome. Robin Morris, thank you so much for everything.
You're welcome, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again for listening, guys. If you want any resources on any of the topics discussed during our mental health check-in series, be sure to visit our station websites or brooklane.org.